Good Chair. I'm very conscious that as we sit here today discussing education, students who otherwise would be doing their exams for their junior, their leaving cert, or taking part in their skill tours in primary school are now sitting at home, and the backdrop, in addition to a pandemic that is impacting them in a multitude of different ways, the backdrop is now they turn on their TVs, their social media, and what they're faced with is pictures coming from their screen of racial injustice and state-sponsored violence in the US. And I think it's important we acknowledge that and we understand it, and we try to position ourselves in terms of those images and what we can do. And I join my colleagues in expressing my thoughts and my solidarity with everyone protesting police brutality and racism. The killing of George Floyd and the countless other black men and women by police is absolutely something that must be protested. It is the inexcusable structural racism that allows innocent black men and women to be killed by police forces without consequence, and the unique brand of politics that excuses these killings and breeds fear and sows division must end. People power, protest and worldwide expressions of solidarity are the only way to do this, and we in the Social Democrats stand in full solidarity with protesters on the Black Lives Matter demonstration, both here and abroad. This is an important moment to reflect on racism and the discrimination that exists in our own country. I have made the point on several occasions in this chamber that diversity matters. In a representative democracy, it is important that a person can witness some semblance of their own likeness as they engage with the structures of the state. It is what this thought that was foremost in my mind as I prepared for the Dáil session on education today. As we pursue a pathway to return to normality, I'm conscious of what normality has been for students from minority backgrounds in Ireland to this point. Marian Wright Edelman famously said, "You can't be what you can't see." And if that's true, our students from low-income backgrounds, students of colour, students with disabilities, students from traveller backgrounds and ethnic minority groupings, they cannot see themselves in the teaching community in Ireland. It's a point that's been made in the previous speaker, but I'm going to elaborate on it a little bit more. The Department of Education and Skills data show that in the period between 2013 and 2014, 1 in 9 primary school children was from a non-Irish background. In our second level schools, 1 in 8 students is born overseas. Lekiela Secondary School in Turtlestown reports 67 nationalities making up their student cohort, but this diversity is not reflected in our teacher professions. Diversity in initial teacher education found that in a study of new primary school teachers in 2014, that 99% of respondents identified as white, Irish and settled, and 100% specified either English or Irish as their first language. For our secondary school teachers, the picture is much the same. Over 98% of those cohort in 2013 and 99% in 2014 entrants expressed their originality as being Irish nationality only or Irish nationality with an additional nationality. There are some positives, Minister, you've mentioned, and I want to touch on the programme you mentioned, because it's a really worthwhile programme. And I really applaud your department and the Departments of Justice and Equality's funding of the Marine and Migrant Teacher Bridging Programme that allows migrants with educational qualifications on a one-year course to become qualified teachers in Ireland. But 40 teachers progressed from that course last year, and that's simply not enough. Dr Emer Nolan, who you'll know, who's a course coordinator there, has said that there's been taken aback by the huge interest in the programme. She quotes, "We have 600 teachers on our mailing list now, and 140 applied to enrol in our current bridging programme. Unfortunately, we could only accommodate 40, so we had to apply selection criteria which took a number of factors into account, including teacher qualifications and their progress through the Teaching Council registration process." Minister, I'm going to appeal to you today. That is an incredibly worthwhile initiative which you clearly value. I think we need to widen the scope of it and to bring more teachers through that same process. When I think about racism that replicates itself and becomes ingrained in our society, I can't help but think about the plight of our traveller community. And of course that goes much deeper than simple representation. We need to reflect on the terrible history of racism in this country and the treatment of travellers by the state. Every day, travellers in Ireland experience a denial of their identity, direct and indirect racism. At an individual level, travellers are denied access to public businesses. Children have expressed being bullied in school. They are denied being called to interviews based on their address. On a structural level, we see an appalling lack of political will to deliver upon traveller accommodation, with city councils returning traveller accommodations budget unspent each year. We see that inequality and that racism compounded further when we look at the deep educational inequality experienced by travellers in Ireland every day. That manifests itself in a multitude of different ways. But if we even see the denial of traveller culture being placed onto the syllabus, or even look at an inability to access third-level education with only 167 travellers of any age expressing having a third-level qualification, that simply isn't acceptable. And when I think about the skills that I've been in when I worked in the Trinity Access programme, going into desk skills, one of the saddest things I've seen, and it's a real shameful indictment of us as a country, is children who are born in Ireland who are still feeling the shameful consequence of that 2004 referendum, which denies them citizenship. Anyone in this third Dáil who is committed to confronting racism in this country needs to commit ourselves to removing that horrendous consequence of that referendum. And we don't need to have another referendum to deal. We shouldn't be going around asking people if they're good enough to live in this country. This Parliament can do it, and we should. We should commit ourselves in the 33rd Dáil. I'm going to move on to a different issue. The Taoiseach mentioned today in his contributions that the COVID payment would now be reduced for people who weren't previously working full-time when the pandemic started in February. Minister, that is going to have a profound impact on students who may not have been working full-time in February, but they certainly would be working full-time now. And they'd be working full-time now so they could cover the cost of potentially their registration fees. You might say Susie will do that, but Susie certainly doesn't do that for everybody. They'd be working full-time to cover the cost of their rent. They'd be working full-time to cover the cost of the further than the point of entry access requirements of books, stationery. And if we're removing this COVID payment, full COVID payment from that cohort who would be working full-time now, it's going to have a terrible consequence for them. So I would appeal to you at the meeting that you're going to be having tomorrow with the Taoiseach to stand up for students in this country, to say that those who would be working full-time now, students or any other cohort, they're going to be impacted by this measure, and it's simply not acceptable. I want to talk a little bit about the 993 students who didn't register for the predictive grading. You've mentioned them in your opening address, Minister, and I really respect that. We cannot let this cohort go. We need to find out who they are. We need to find out the reasons by which they may not have registered themselves for calculated grades, and we need to be sure we offer them every single opportunity to be treated the same as any other student in this country. Minister, you've mentioned your engagement with schools and your department's engaging with schools, but they're simply, from talking to schools, and we talk to schools all the time, they contact us. I'll give you an indication of the last contact I've had from schools just this morning was a school ringing me up asking about school bus places. For when students come back, if we are going back in September, simply getting their students onto a bus. Are these considerations being taken? In an urban environment that for me is Dublin bus being crammed at 8:30 in the morning, I'm sure it's different in a rural context, but under social distancing, that's simply not going to be possible. So I hope you're considering that also. I'll leave it there. Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Minister.